谢咖啡俱乐部给我们提供今晚的平台，也谢谢大家抽出宝贵时间来参加我们今晚的讨论。今天的主题是美国高中生的标化考试 SAT。我和我的 partner Jocelyn 先把我们各自的背景给大家介绍一下。我是北京大学本科数学，芝加哥大学数理统计博士。毕业以后在华尔街工作了10多年，曾就职于摩根斯坦利、花旗银行和瑞士银行。我因为从小呢受父母的影响，对数学一直非常有兴趣，对数学教育也很热衷。在工作期间，我周末一直在中文学校教数学竞赛班和数学趣味班。在我的老大上初中，老二上小学的时候，我成了在家的妈妈。这样呢，我就有时间和朋友一起成立了一个课后的数学俱乐部。我们教从小学、初中、高中的数学竞赛，以及辅导 SAT 数学、AP Calculus、AP Statistics 和 AP Physics。今年呢，特别幸运的是，通过朋友，我认识了我现在的 partner Jocelyn Palmer。我现在呢，先请 Jocelyn 给大家介绍一下她的背景。Jocelyn, I just introduced my background to the audience. Now I'm handing it to you.
Okay, and I will welcome everybody. I will share the screen right now. Is that okay, Ina? Okay. Okay. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody to our talk this evening, Succeeding on the SAT, and it's my great pleasure to be working with Jennifer on this talk tonight. Jennifer covering the math and myself covering the reading and the writing. Jennifer has already given you her background. You'll see my background at the bottom of the screen. I received my BA in English Literature from Smith College and worked in journalism for a few years at a national newspaper. And then I went on to business school at Columbia University, where I earned my MBA in marketing and in finance. Right after that, I went to Wall Street as an equity analyst and rose to become a senior equity analyst at a major brokerage firm. I think you'll all be interested to know that I covered the industry mining, which is something I had never expected to do, but it was fascinating work. And then I became a mother. At that time, I chose to stay at home raising our 2 girls. And while I did that, I was very active in volunteer work and began writing for several nonprofits. So I have been providing writing and editing services for some time now. Eventually, I did decide to focus on the college application process. I've helped many students gain acceptance to colleges here in the United States, and that led also to work with standardized testing and academic enrichment and the formation of Cornerstone Prep. So that is a little bit of my background. I thought I would go to our story. Jennifer and I have much in common, and we are delighted to do the work we do. We are both parents. I'm sure Jennifer told you that. Our children have gone through, well, some are in the process of going through college, but they have gone through the process of taking the SAT as well as other standardized tests. We know how it works. I have 2 girls. Jennifer has 2 sons. This is a process that we know extremely well. We also understand through both in our personal lives with our children and with our clients that high school students today are very, very busy. They have their extracurriculars, but also they've got to keep up their high school grades. Grades are so important now more than ever, I would say. So we do strive to be efficient. We do not want to waste our students' time, and we teach them efficiency on the tests as well. I think we are also very, very focused on making our students comfortable. We feel that the emotional component in academic tutoring and testing is extremely important. So not only are we passionate about what we do, but we try to bring the qualities of patience and encouragement and really just, real compassion to our teaching practice. We especially focus on being non-judgmental. Every student is different. Every student has strengths and weaknesses, just like our own children do. And we consider that to be very, very important. In fact, I'd like to just mention, I know Jennifer shared her own son's journey with the SAT. My younger daughter in particular, in the very beginning, was struggling with the SAT, not getting the scores that she felt she should. And I think she realized over time that the SAT is about hard work. There's no real magic formula, and rare is the student who is so brilliant that he or she just wakes up, walks into the exam room and gets a straight 800 on both exams, on both components. In fact, I love to tell the story of a young woman. I heard this, she's not a student of mine, but she ended up matriculating at Harvard, and she did get double 800s, but it was quite a journey. It was quite difficult, and she worked very, very hard. And I think this is a valuable story because we all have to work hard. We all have to work hard. So we are certainly not judgmental because we know everybody has something to learn in this process. Finally, Jennifer and I teach the same students. That's what we do. She teaches the math portion. I teach the reading and writing. We know the same child. We can provide the same, we can share our insights and our observations, and we feel that that adds something to the service we provide because 2 is better than 1. So we enjoy that aspect, the collaborative aspect. I'm going to move on to our approach. You could describe our approach as quite technical in nature, and I'm going to speak to that, and Jennifer will continue on with some comments about the emotional aspect. Knowledge is extremely important in the SAT. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the SAT in a few minutes, but it has become very much of an assessment test. Again, it's not a test you just roll out of bed and walk in and take. You must prepare. You must know the subject matter. You must understand the grammar. You must understand the algebra behind the questions. It's not simply a question of taking the test over and over again. So we provide actual teaching of material, and we consider that absolutely vital. Second, strategy. Strategy is important. Time constraints are real. You will see later on in our presentation, there is not a lot of time. And there are specific skills that the test taker, that the testing authority, the College Board, is looking to see if the student understands. So, for example, we have different strategies in the reading comprehension section, and I will go over those a little bit later, but strategy is critical. And finally, practice. We emphasize the practice component very much because after all, you can think you know something and you think you know your strategy, but until it's tested, you're not really sure how you're going to do. So knowledge, strategy, and practice are represent a three-pronged approach. They're the three pillars of how we approach the SAT. Jennifer, do you want to talk a little bit about the emotional and aspirational?
Sure. 我和 Jocelyn 我们俩都有上过高中，考过标化考试，参加过申请过大学的孩子，所以我们俩作为家长都非常理解学生们在繁重的课业之外，还要抽出时间考标化考试的辛苦。所以我们的目标呢是帮助孩子们用最少的时间考出最好的成绩来。SAT 的考试内容并不难，但是呢，准备却是很重要的。我在这儿想跟大家 share 一个，就是我们家老大准备 SAT 的这个小过程吧。我想用这个故事来说明一下这个准备的重要性。我们老大呢上的是当地的一所比较好的公立学校，然后他的成绩呢也不错，他现在是普林斯顿大学3年级的学生。在他11年级的时候，他觉得这个SAT 的考试内容比较简单，而且我的数学和英文都不错，我不用准备，我直接就上去考。所以结果他12月份那次考试考得特别糟。后来他就he learned a lesson， 假期的时候就认认真真的把 SAT 准备了一遍，然后考出了比较好的成绩。所以呢，准备是很重要的。我和 Jocelyn 我们俩对这个教育吧，我们俩都 share 相同的理念。我们觉得这个教育呢，就是教书和育人，这是两个密不可分的层面。我们希望不仅成为孩子们的良师，也希望成为他们的益友。所以我们的宗旨是 be passionate, be patient, be encouraging, be non-judgmental。我们希望每个孩子都能考出他的潜能来，就是我们不会说，这个孩子根据他的成绩，他只能考出这个成绩来。we always aim high。我们希望每个孩子都能考出最好的成绩。所以呢，我们不会，对我们来说 ，no boxes, no labels, no limits. We always aim high。下面呢，Jocelyn 会给大家介绍一下 SAT 的 history。Jocelyn, let's go to SAT history.
Okay. The SAT has been around a long time, and I did not actually put on this slide when it first appeared. It actually first appeared in 1899, and it was created at Columbia University. But initially, it was designed to help schools come up with an appropriate curriculum. And it wasn't actually introduced to the public until 1926. Still, it has been around almost 100 years, clearly. Originally, it was considered to be an IQ test, so it was appropriately called the Scholastic Aptitude Test. But with the rise decades later of the test prep industry, it was realized that with preparation, scores could rise. And so the name was changed to perhaps position it more like an assessment or a school test. And so the name changed to Scholastic Assessment Test. Today, in 2021, it no longer means Scholastic Aptitude Test or Scholastic Assessment Test. It simply stands for the SAT. It is simply a trademark. I do want to mention just some recent changes. When I say recent, I mean 5 years ago, so it's really not so recent anymore. But some of you may remember students who would say, well, I received a 2200 on the SAT, or that very fortunate person who said, I received a 2400 on the SAT. Those were the days when there were three components to the test: the reading and writing portion, the math portion, and what was called the essay portion. As of March 2016, the test was changed quite considerably. First, the essay portion was made optional and it was scored separately. And there were only two scores that really mattered: the reading score and the writing and language score. Also, the penalty for guessing was eliminated. So now students could, or now they can, guess freely, and there's no penalty. Obscure words that perhaps were in the vocabulary back in 1928 or 1935 are not appearing so much in the SAT anymore. Similarly, reading passages, I will soon talk about this, how there are 5 reading passages. They are spread out across a range of disciplines. So the sense is there's a bit more inclusiveness. And of course, we all know that there have been many discoveries made in science and technology, and those passages reflect those societal changes. In addition, words are, students are tested to understand meanings of words in a larger context and not in an isolated statement. So the purpose here is to make the SAT more relevant to today's world, and to also make it more useful, because the SAT, and I will talk about this a little later, the SAT is used by admissions committees to inform them of a student's preparedness. So it's all about, is this student prepared to take on the demands of our particular college, whatever, or our university, whatever university that is. And as you all know, there are different standards for, what is an acceptable SAT score for admission, or what is the average SAT score. You all know that the past year and a half has really changed the admissions landscape considerably, in that most schools now are test optional, meaning you are not required to submit an SAT score. All the Ivy League schools, most of the public Ivies, what we call, University of Michigan, University of Virginia, and the little Ivies, meaning some of the very best of the liberal arts colleges, have gone test optional, at least for this year and possibly next year. Some of that is, we don't know yet. So, and many schools, such as the University of California, that big system, have decided to eliminate the SAT altogether. So oftentimes people say the SAT, or they suggest it's not as relevant as it used to be. But Jennifer and I feel just the opposite. We feel it's more relevant than ever, because, as they say, it's the only game in town. There are not many tests, if any, that offer what the SAT does. It offers a generalized view of a student's preparedness. It offers insight of a student's ability to perform in various disciplines. There are some tests that students still take. The advanced placement exam, you heard that Jennifer tutors advanced placement exams. Those are still going to be very, very important. Even then, however, the AP exam is testing a student on a specific subject. Similarly, the international baccalaureate exams, maybe some of you have children in IB schools, they are not going to necessarily provide the same sort of sweeping overview of a student's preparedness that the SAT provides. Therefore, the SAT remains relevant, and test optional means it's optional. You don't need to submit the SAT score. But Jennifer and I think, why not? Because if you have two candidates that are identical in every way, except one candidate has submitted his or her SAT score, or both do, and one score is higher, it makes it much easier for admissions committees to say, we want the person who submitted an SAT score, or we want the person whose SAT score is higher. So we think taking the SAT is a wise decision, especially now when so many students are opting not to take it. And submitting it can really work in a student's favor. In addition, the SAT does indicate in my opinion, and Jennifer feels the same way, preparing and taking the SAT is not always very enjoyable. It requires hard work, and then you have to get up early in the morning to take it. And you might want to have to take it more than once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. It indicates a seriousness of purpose about going to college that I think is communicates a great deal to admissions committees. I wanted to mention too, subject tests. Maybe some of you know that in the United States, for many years, we have had subject tests that are similar to the APs, except they're a little bit shorter, and you don't take a course in school to prepare you, but they are 1 hour in length on a specific subject. Again, there's that specificity. They do not give you the broad view. So the SAT is an old test. It's an important test. I think it's going to be around for a while, and we don't know what's going to happen for next year's admissions cycle, that is for 22 entrants in 2023. My guess is that quite a few schools will return to requiring the SAT. Okay, Jennifer, do you want to add anything to that, or?
Oh, sure. 对，我和 Jocelyn， 很多家长都会问我们这个问题，你们觉得这个 SAT 还重要吗？我们的感觉是 SAT 还是非常重要的。第一，它反映了一个学生对申请大学这个事情的重视程度。在这么繁重的课业之外，他还愿意抽出时间来把 SAT 考好，这是一个 attitude。另外呢，我觉得这个招生官制，它还是需要一个这个横向的比较，因为就在试想2个学生，他们的 GPA 差不多，他们的课外活动差不多，甚至他们的 essay 也很难分出高下，但是一个学生 SAT 接近满分，另外一个学生没考，肯定这个考了并且考得不错的孩子有更大的 advantage。所以 yes， 我们还是觉得 SAT 很重要。SAT 呢，在2016年有一些比较大的改革。在数学方面呢，SAT 减小了一些几何的比重，增加了应用题，就 work problems 和一些data analysis 数据分析的比重。那么增加这些 work problems 呢，有的 work problems 它的 descriptions 比较长，这样呢就让这个speed 就是速度变得越来越重要。我们在后面会谈一下这个问题。Thank you, Jocelyn.
Okay. Thought we'd just look at some SAT dates for 2021, 2022. These are the dates that don't change too much from year to year, but it's always helpful to see if any changes have been made. This looks like a normal year for the most part. You see that tests are only offered in 7 months of the year, which is very, very important in planning your test-taking schedule. Many students take the test, as I mentioned, twice or 3 times, and sometimes even more. And it is very important to consider timing. For example, if you are a rising junior, you just finished 10th grade, you will be entering in the 11th grade in the fall. This is the year to take the SAT. The temptation is often to take it immediately, just as practice. I'm just going to take this test as practice, see how I do. Generally, that is not considered to be a good idea. The best approach, we believe, is to really study for the test before you take it. There are many reasons for this. One of the most important reasons is that it can sometimes be difficult if you haven't really performed as well as you would have liked, and students do get discouraged. They just do get discouraged. I mentioned that my daughter was discouraged a bit in the beginning, and she studied hard, and she took it twice, and she did much better the second time. And I didn't mention she's now very happy. She's headed off to the University of Chicago in September and couldn't be more delighted. But at the time, it was very tricky, and she was concerned she might even have to take it 3 times. But if you are a rising junior, study first, and then you've got September and October at school, being in school where you're writing essays every week, where you are taking tests, you're under time pressure, you are under pressure to perform. By the time you get to November, December, you're in a real test-taking mode, and you've been writing, and you've been reading, and you've been solving math problems, and you've been doing test prep. You're really in a great position to take that test come November, December. So those are the dates we like, and March as well. March is good. A time that is generally not very good for juniors is May and June. Now they say, oh, it's fine, I'll take the test. But the reality is that, as many of you probably know, junior year is one of the most challenging years in high school. The students have so many tests, so many homework assignments, so much to do in their extracurricular life that it's very difficult to squeeze in the test. So what happens is they end up taking it in August, right before their senior year. And that's a little tricky. It works out, but we really recommend that juniors get the test taken November, December, March, somewhere around there. For rising seniors, if you haven't taken the test, as I just described in your junior year, it's important for parents and students to know that October is really the last time, if you're applying early decision or early action, it's the last time you can really safely take the test. Many schools allow you to take it in November, but it's not a given. So Jennifer and I like to say, aim for October. If you are applying, as I said, early decision or early action, because the deadline for those applications is November 1. So you will have wanted to complete your standardized testing, taking the SAT. Very, very important to consider this when you are starting your college applications. All right, I thought I would move to Jennifer. Do you have anything to add, or?
No, you covered everything. Great.
Good. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first part of the SAT. This is actually the first section. Actually, this is both sections 1 and 2, SAT reading and then SAT writing and language. Some people just call the writing and language writing. So if you hear me say writing, you'll know that I'm referring to writing and language. So as you can see, there's a lot to be done in this test. The reading section at 65 minutes and 52 questions yields about 1¼ minutes per question. And if you see some of the passages, you know that some of them can be highly, highly technical, and some of them can be highly literary. So it's very helpful to prepare thoroughly. Again, you just don't have a lot of time to sort of sit back and contemplate what the answer might be. Writing and language, you have under 1 minute to complete each question. 35 minutes, 44 questions. A little bit about the first section, the reading section. This tests comprehension. It tests your ability to make inferences, draw conclusions, summarize, synthesize data. In fact, many of the passages have charts, they have graphs, they have maps. It's not science, but they do have some sort of graphic image that you need to look at and pair with the material in the passage. So this section has 5 passages or 5 sections. 4 of them contain one passage, and then there's a passage, a section that has 2 contrasting passages. So you might have historical figure number 1 making one argument and historical figure number 2 making an opposing argument. So you have 2 arguments going against one another. And the following questions, there are about 10 or 12 questions after every passage or the paired passage. And they test all the things I've mentioned: comprehension, your ability to infer, and each question has 4 possible answers. I mentioned earlier that after March of 2016, the test became more relevant, included passages from across a range of disciplines. So now you have at least one passage from US literature or world literature. You have 2 passages that come that could be described as having a history background or a social studies background, and then you'll have 2 science passages. This is a standard in every SAT. Timing, 13 minutes per passage. I may have mentioned that, not that much. So again, a real emphasis on moving thoroughly but steadily, moving quickly but steadily. The writing and language section is often quite difficult for students because they last sat in a classroom learning grammar and learning punctuation 3 to 4 years earlier, and they haven't thought about it since 7th or 8th grade. So what we do is really teach grammar, almost teach it again. We don't go into quite the detail, but we cover all the main bases as if they are still, back in 7th or 8th grade. Punctuation, what makes a proper sentence? What idioms do you need to know? Sometimes international students have difficulty with idioms because they don't recognize turns of phrases that Americans use every day. In this section, there are 4 passages. Again, you may see charts, you may see graphs, you may see maps. You have 11 multiple choice questions and 4 possible answers per question. 8 minutes per passage. A lot to do. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about scoring. Jennifer and I will both say emphatically that this test has no mercy. The margin for error is very, very small. So, for example, if you get just 3 wrong on the reading test, you got a 370. If you get just 2 wrong on the, actually that's pretty good. If you get, say, 5 wrong, you're already down to a 360, okay? So you add those 2 up, and that is what gives you your score in the reading and the writing component of the test. So for example, over here, I show you that if you get 2 wrong, 370, and 3 wrong in writing and language, 380, you got a total score of 750. 5 wrong in the reading and writing section. It's still a very good score, but it's not easy. You can make 1 or 2 wrong and your score really starts to fall. Jennifer, do you want to talk about the math now?
Sure. SAT 数学2部分，一部分是可用计算器的，一部分是不可用的。没有计算器的这一部分呢，有20道题，25分钟，其中15道题是 multiple choices 选择题，5道题是 grade in 就是学生们自己填写答案。有计算器的这一部分是55分钟，38道题，其中30道题是选择题，8道题是规定。刚才我提到的就是这些最近2016年以后增加的这个 word problems 和 data analysis， 主要是在有计算器的这一部分。Jocelyn, could you move to the...
Yes.
Thank you. So, SAT 数学考的内容呢，基本上从小学到高中学的数学都会考一些。这个 SAT 的这个，因为抱歉，从2016年以后呢，增加了很多对，增加了很多应用题。很抱歉。所以呢，速度呢就变得。
Jennifer, do you want to drink some water?
Yeah, I need to drink some water. 非常抱歉。所以呢，速度就变得很重要。很多家长问我，就说考好数学有什么诀窍没有？我觉得最重要的呢，就是把概念理解清楚，而不是记住某一类型的解题方式。只有概念清楚了，才有可能举一反三。我到现在都记得我们高中一个化学老师说过的一句话，他说这个化学反应千变万变不离其中，这个数学考题也是这样的，你只要把这个某一个 topic 的概念搞清楚了，它不管题目怎么变，你基本上都是没问题的。然后这个速度问题呢，我觉得这个只能就说practice is a key， 尽量的 practice。这个就像所有的体育一样，我经常跟我的学生们提到，你如果喜欢打 tennis，道理上呢，你知道哪里有个空缺，你要把球打到那个空缺，但是你没有一定量的练习，这个是不可能的。这个 SAT 数学也是一样的，概念理解清楚，然后足够的练习。Thank you, Jocelyn. 好，对，我再谈一下这个SAT 的分数的这个 curving。正如这个 Jocelyn 刚才提到的 ，SAT 数学的容错率也非常低。如果错3道题，一共是58道题，如果有3个错误，你的分数就从800掉到了760。所以呢，这个提高正确率、有速度提高正确率都非常重要。Thank you, Jocelyn.
Yeah, I'll just mention too that you'll notice it says practice test number 5 here. So these are the specific numbers used to score that specific test. But you should know that they don't change that much. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew this was a very specific test, but then again, it's quite representative of what a test would be. And in fact, this practice test was an actual test administered in May of 2016. Okay, so Jennifer and I are offering quite a few classes. They're not even necessarily all on this slide for upcoming exams, SAT exams. As you know, there's an exam on August 28th, and there's another exam on October 2nd. If you look at our times, if you do not live in the United States and you're in a very different time zone, these times are not going to work for you. But Jennifer and I want you to know that we are very much, we're very happy to create custom group schedules for international students or anybody who is in a very difficult time zone. Also, we offer in all our group classes, we offer 2 complimentary practice tests. And we really feel these practice tests are very, very important. These are in addition to the sessions. So you, in this particular case, those sessions you can see on this slide, we meet Mondays and Wednesdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays, but then we have our practice tests on Fridays. And these tests are administered under strict test conditions. We observe all the rules of the SAT as far as we can, because this is on Zoom, but we time the students very carefully, and we also administer breaks, just as the SAT does. So we do, again, try to match the testing environment that the student would face on the day of the test. This is our contact information. Jennifer and I are welcome to take any questions you might have. We're going to have a Q&A after this, but if you'd like to contact us privately, you can see here, Jennifer has her QR code. I have my QR code. You can also reach us at this email, testing@cstoneprep.com. And we would be happy, again, to answer any questions, listen to your stories, help you in any way. It's a very, very important time of life for young students. You only get one chance to take a test like the SAT, or 1 or 3 chances, only one chance to get through 11th grade and 12th grade. And very important to take the college application process very seriously. So that concludes our presentation. Ina, may I close the screen, or would you like me to?
You can leave it there in case people would like to scan and leave your contact information.
Yes, of course. Okay.
Wow. You know, I didn't grow up here. It's my first time getting to know about SAT, but I feel like I learned so much. Thank you. So I think we have about 10 questions collected from the chat box. We can answer those first, and if we have extra time, we can go over other questions. I will just ask by order. The first 2 questions was for Jennifer, asking about if you are okay to disclose that how many more score was your son be able to get compared with the first and second SAT tests, and whether he did practice tests before the official test for his first exam experience.
Right. Sure. 我的老大他第一次考试是 December， 他当时可能只做了1套practice test， 因为他觉得这个考试内容不难，我的英文和数学都不错，所以他觉得他可以裸考上阵裸考。结果呢，当然成绩就不理想。后来他的学校的 counselor 就比较郑重地告诉他，如果你想去，你想申请到你想去的学校，你的这个 SAT 是不行的。你如果想去 Princeton 去 Harvard， 那你得考到1570以上。所以他就假期比较认真地复习了一下，把重点都过了一遍。后来没有考到，也不是很高，1580，但是我还好吧，他基本上达到了自己的目标。
Okay, thank you. The second question, I could combine 2 of them. So one question was asking, what is the acceptable SAT score for the top 20 colleges or universities? And there is an individual case in terms of if they took the SAT score and only got about 1300 plus score for SAT optional university, would you recommend them to submit the score if they don't see a possibility of getting a score over 1400? So these are two separate questions, but I'm asking them together.
So Ina, I would greatly appreciate it if you could briefly repeat those two questions.
Oh, the first question is for a student to try to apply for a top 20 university. What is the acceptable SAT? Do you have a general idea about that? So that's the first question. The second question is, for example, if I am the applicant, I was able to get a SAT score around 1300. And I don't see a possibility for me to get a score over 1400. Would you still recommend me submitting my SAT score for a SAT optional university during my application?
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to the acceptable SAT scores. I think the question was for top universities, did you say?
Yes, top 20.
Okay.
The top 20, yes.
Right, so I'm actually looking at something right now. Columbia's average SAT score is 1492. Cornell University's average SAT score is 1471. Johns Hopkins average SAT score is 1500. Let me give you another one. Williams College average SAT score is 1480. Mm-hmm. So there are many others. I'm just speaking to a few. You really want to have a score in the high 1400s, and some would say you really want to have a score in the 1500s. Truly, that is what is required. When my daughters were applying to college, they said to get into the very most competitive schools, you really needed to have something around 1550. Jennifer, what would you say on that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jocelyn. I agree with your assessment.
And I think this individual asked a very good question. What do you do? And I would say you want to apply to a college whose SAT scores are either close to your own or maybe slightly lower. If you have a 1400 SAT score and you are applying to Johns Hopkins, whose average SAT score is 1500, there's a problem. So the question makes a lot of sense if you are applying to a school where your score is very close to the average, and you might be concerned about, should it be better? Should it be higher? That's a valid concern. But going back to what we were saying earlier, at this time, when so many students, I believe, are opting not to submit scores and not even to take the SAT, it often can help you if you submit your score. But it's a very, very good question, and it's difficult to come up with the right answer. But I can tell you the only easy answer I have is make sure that your scores are fairly aligned with the school to which you are applying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with Jocelyn's assessment. SAT, 提交 SAT 呢，we don't think it will hurt you in any way. 它就说一个好的 SAT 成绩肯定会提升你整个的 profile。另外呢，我们觉得它也是反映了一个孩子的这个态度吧，就是对申请学校的重视，以及就是一个比较严肃端正的态度吧。
I'd just like to add too the names of a few schools that at this very moment are test optional, but They're test optional, but they actually encourage you to submit your scores. And they are Yale University, the University of Pennsylvania, Rice University, and Georgetown. This is for the people who are wondering, should I submit my score? These schools really would like you to submit your scores. And in fact, some of them would like you to admit all your scores. In other words, Georgetown University, before COVID, required that if you took your SAT 3 times, you had to submit all 3 scores. It's called a lack of score choice. Cornell University is the same way. Prior to COVID, no score choice. You were required to submit all your scores. If you'd taken the SAT 5 times, you had to submit all 5 scores. So today, these schools, because of COVID, are not requiring the SAT, but they are encouraging you nonetheless to submit your scores.
Jocelyn and Jennifer, there is a relevant question coming out asking if each college actually posts their SAT score requirement. And probably where can you find that information?
Okay, you go to your browser on your computer and you type in the name of the school, www, the name of the school, and then .edu. Now, that's not a rule because maybe the school will have some other aspect of its name that's in the that's its web address, but you simply have to search for the school online and then go to the admissions page and look for information on standardized testing. Some schools make it a little trickier, but most schools don't. Schools are very proud. They're very proud of their high SAT scores, and they want people to know because they feel that the SAT, along with grades, high grade GPAs, grade point averages, those are 2 indicators of competitiveness. So most likely, if you search for a school's website, you go to admissions and you go to standardized testing, you will find either a range or you'll find one number.
Okay. The next question asking about very general, how to improve SAT reading.
That's an excellent question, really. To be honest, I think it's never too early to start reading, to read widely. You can come to an SAT test prep course and you will learn a great deal, whether it's math, reading, or writing, but nothing can make up for, or nothing can add more to your future than starting to read as much as you can, as often as you can. I would say one of the tips that I think is very, very helpful to do right now, because what I'm saying now may not be relevant to somebody whose child is going into 12th grade or going into 11th grade. When you prepare for the SAT, do not try to finish the test on time. At least the reading, I'm not going to speak for the math, but the reading and the writing. Don't try to finish it in the 65 minutes that you've been given for reading or the 35 minutes for writing language. Focus on getting the answers right. Go slow. This is in the beginning. Go slow. And once you have really feel your comprehension is increasing and your accuracy is improving, then get your watch out, get your timer out and start timing yourself. But I think that's a tip that I feel is very helpful.
Yeah, it kind of answered another question about what's your recommendation for students who want to prepare the SAT by themselves?
Well, I feel that that's possible. I would say get some books, start reading, follow the guidance of the author, and practice, practice, practice. But it requires a lot of discipline. One of the things that I enjoyed about SAT prep for our daughters is that because they didn't want to learn from their mother, but that's okay. You know, taking test prep forces you to get up and go somewhere or go online, and somebody else is watching you, somebody else is talking to you, and it's sometimes a little easier. A great deal of self-discipline is required if you're doing it on your own. But if you do wish to do it on your own, by all means, do not simply take the College Board practice tests. That's you should be working with some sort of book, and there are many, many good books out there. There are many very talented writers who have, you know, some great information to share.
对，这个我也可以加一点我的意见。College Board 他们的 website 上有8套 SAT 的复习题，但是我觉得它的数学 portion 呢比较简单。你如果就说可以买一些像 Jocelyn 提到的，可以买一些补充的课外书，例如我觉得 Barron 就是一个很好的这个 Complementary source。Barron 的数学题比那个 College Board 上那8道题要难一些。我觉得就是说难度呢，就是你会做比较难的题，就是对你的速度和你的 confidence 都是一个 boost。另外呢，这些解题呢，我发现他们的有的解题就是太过复杂，或者说呢，解的比较就是不是最简洁的方式。每道数学题都有很多解法，但是因为时间的限制，你希望就是说用最简单最快的方式来解决你的数学问题。这样的话，你就有比较多的时间。往往是有些孩子呢，发现后来时间不太够了，然后就特别紧张，然后就不应该出的错也都出错了。所以呢，我觉得就是说每道题呢，不是说我会解就行了，最好是你找出一个能最快解决这些问题的方式，这样的话会节省很多时间。
Jennifer， 现在 chat 里面有一个问题说没听清，到底是哪个机构的题更难一些？
对，那个 College Board 上提供了8套练习题，然后 Barron 也是一个很好的 Barron， 大家都可以在 Amazon 上面买到。
Barron 怎么拼写
？Barrons Barrons。对 Barrons 我觉得也是就是说提供了几套非常好的练习题。Barron 上面的数学部分要比 College Board 这8套题的数学难一些，但是我 strongly encourage 大家就把这些题也做一遍，因为难度会提升，肯定会提升你的自信心和速度，你会了难的，简单的就更容易。
我这里提醒一下大家，我有看到你们的问题，然后再尽量的把类似的问题合并在一起。我看我们今天的时间是都可以回答的，所以请大家不要重复提问，不要着急，一定会问到的。So the next question is asking about there have been quite a few questions related to what is the best timing for students at different grade level to prepare for the SAT. Including whether October is good for rising junior, whether 9th grade is too early to prepare, and what is the best timing for sophomores. I will say if there is another one, but in general, these questions are similar, but I guess they all want to get kind of individual answers specifically.
Well, I'll just speak to 9th grade, 10th grade. I think the most important work to be done in those early years is really focusing on doing well in your schoolwork. and reading as much as possible. I don't mean just the reading that you do for school, the assigned reading. I mean, in the summer, on your vacations, read and think and read widely. This is hard to do sometimes because we all want to read what we want to read. Not everybody wants to read science articles. Not everybody wants to read articles about the arts. But the SAT will test students on a range of articles, as we've discussed. So I actually am not so sure there are major rewards to taking SAT prep in the 9th grade. I would recommend that what I just said, and also you could do academic enrichment. For example, I have been teaching workshops in reading and writing and grammar and vocabulary to 7th and 8th graders, and it does seem to help them greatly, and it exposes them to literature. And once you expose children to literature, and probably I'm assuming the same thing is true of math, you know, they gain confidence, and then they feel confident about reading more. So if I were the parent of a 9th grader, I would cultivate an appreciation of literature and deep thinking rather than simply taking practice tests. Is it harmful to take practice tests or to do SAT prep in 9th grade? No, it's not. But I don't think it's really, I'm not so sure it's really necessary. I would rather see a young person develop intellectually. And for 10th graders, I would say a little bit more of the same. And I think Jennifer and I probably agree on what would be best for later on. What would you say, Jennifer, in 11th and 12th grade?
Well, yeah, we discussed a little bit about this, and we agreed that for 11th grade, the best time to take SAT is October and November.
Right. You really want to, let me see if I can go back to that, the slide with the dates. I believe it is this one. So for the person asking about timing, if you are an older student, let's say you're rising 11th grader, meaning you're entering 11th grade this year, you can take October, or you can even wait another month. Because as I was saying, when you're in school, you're taking a lot of tests, you're writing, you know, you're getting oiled up, so to speak. And sometimes it takes students a couple of months to sort of get acclimated to school. And so while October is definitely good, November, December are ideal, and even March for somebody going into 11th grade. And then was there somebody in 12th grade that asked the question too, or was it just 11th grade? Because in 12th grade, you don't have much of a choice. You really must take, as Jennifer was mentioning, you must take the test by October. You know, possibly November, but it depends upon, it might be, November 6th might be too late.
I think there is a relevant question about, except for timing, whether it matters, like in terms of how competitive it can be when you take the exam in different time.
That's $1 million question, but honestly, I used to think about that a lot when our daughters were taking it, but frankly, I don't think there is. I don't know if it really matters. The College Board claims there is no difference. And, you know, some people might think, oh, August is a wonderful time to take it. Everybody's away on vacation. No, they're not. A lot of students take it in August, especially juniors going to college, because they're not happy with the score they got in May or June. So they take it in August. And somebody, you know, almost every date on this list has some significance to somebody. So it's a little like, you know, they say, don't time the stock market. I don't know if even given the advice that Jennifer and I are giving you, sometimes life intervenes and you have to do what you have to do. But going back to the original question, I don't personally think there's a lot of difference in terms of competitiveness. But there's one thing I will say, another reason to take the exam in November or December, if you are a rising junior and March, is maturation of the student. Students are growing up so much junior year, and especially the fall semester of junior year. What happens is everybody starts talking about college, and the student who used to be very relaxed all of a sudden realizes that he or she will not be there in a year and a half. And they're going to go somewhere. And there's a seriousness that takes over, not to mention the fact that the schoolwork is more challenging, and it's not even more challenging, it's just they're going at a higher level. So I think mentally, as late as possible, but at the same time, Jennifer and I don't really recommend May and June of junior year, because students, they're so tired at that point, and they're so busy at the end of the year that it usually doesn't work. But again, it's very individual.
Okay, thank you. The next question is about whether there is value of taking section 5, the extra section, assuming, if I understand right, seems to be the writing.
Oh, that's no longer offered. As of June 2020, I think this individual is talking about the optional essay. As of June 2021, this year, it's no longer offered.
Okay.
It's been discontinued.
Okay. There are also questions asking about the differences between SAT and ACT, and whether different colleges consider it as kind of compatible. Yeah, I think there are several people asking similar questions about that.
So Jennifer, why don't I speak to the reading, writing portion, and then you can talk about the math and just a general view of the ACT, which is also a very good test. Historically, the ACT has been for Midwest in the United States, has been for Midwestern and Western students, but that has changed quite a bit. And today there are many students in the United States and around the world that take the ACT, whereas 20 years ago, they might have taken the SAT. And some people feel that the ACT is a little bit better for the student with strong spatial recognition skills and ability in the sciences, who's interested in science and strong in the sciences. So there's a bias there, and this is something I've heard many, many times, and I think there is some truth to that. The time constraints on the ACT are just as real as the SAT. So I would never say the ACT is an easier test. It may be easier for some people, but it is not an easier test. Something I'm going to say now may not be relevant in a few years, but I still feel that if your student wishes to go to school in the United States, especially on the East Coast, maybe an Ivy League school, but maybe an old school, but on the East Coast, there is a possibility that admissions officers took the SAT just because of their age. Because as I was saying, 20 years ago, not as many people on the East Coast were taking the ACT. When I was growing up, the ACT really wasn't an option. So those people are probably going to favor the SAT takers just because they know the test and they know what it takes to do well on the SAT. So if you're an admissions committee officer and you've gotten, you earned a 1550, you're going to really appreciate what it means to have achieved that score on the SAT. The ACT, you may not really appreciate what a 35 means as much. I mean, you know, it's a good score. So I would say if your student's heart is set on an East Coast school, consider scientific interests, but also consider that the SAT is still the most popular test.
So a relevant question is, if I've already taken either ACT or SAT, do you recommend me taking the other one?
Oh, if you've already taken the SAT, should you take the ACT? And if you've already taken the ACT, should you take the SAT?
Yeah.
Well, some students do take both, certainly. I think this comes back to a question of timing. I would say it really depends on you. I actually rather like the idea if you enjoy taking tests and you're good at it, why not? You have 2 good scores to show. But again, look at, you know, junior year is not very long. If you can squeeze it in without harming your academic preparation, then do it. But the key is today, 2021, grades are very important. So as long as it doesn't interfere with academic preparation, I would say try it.
Also, there is a clarification about the question I asked before in terms of the extra section. I think she or he meant to say the 5th section for writing or reading, not the essay.
There are only 4 sections. There are 2 for reading. There are 2 for the reading and writing, and then there are 2 for math. There used to be the essay section, but there is no. Are you? I'm not aware of any. No, there's no.
I think if I understand right, it's like within the writing or reading, there are, for example, 4 passages. Maybe there is an extra one as optional.
Oh no,
is there any value of taking that?
Yeah, there's nothing optional. You need to complete all. If you choose not to, you're going to get a very, very low score. There are no optional anything.
Okay. Sure.
Well, I also like to add to the difference between SAT and ACT. SAT 考reading, writing and math 两个 portion。ACT 有3个 ，in addition to math and reading, writing, ACT 还考science portion，所以呢，这个很多家长也问起过我们这些问题，我们的回答是，有的孩子呢，他就是说 SAT 对他更合适，有的对另外一些孩子来说，可能 ACT 对他更合适。例如这2个考试的数学就侧重点就不太一样 ，ICT 呢有更多的这个 work problems 和data analysis，所以我觉得这就 before you decide what to take， 你们孩子们可以先2个都 take 一下，然后比较一下，就是觉得哪一个考试我更可能就说。更 play to my strength。另外呢，刚才有一个家长问到，就是说我已经 take 了 ACT， 是不是还需要 SAT 或 vice versa？ 我觉得如果你对你的成绩已经很满意了，另外一个考试我认为就是不需要的。除非你觉得我这个 ACT 我不是特别理想，我觉得我的 ICT 能比这个百分比高很多，那当然了 by all means， give it another try。
There is a question about what is SAT super score?
Do you want to answer that, Jennifer, or do you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can explain that. Super score 是这样的，就是说 例如你 take 了2次 SAT， 然后呢，你的 SAT 最后的成绩呢，你可以从2次的数学成绩选个最高的，加上你的这个 reading writing 2个成绩里头选一个比较高的，然后这 combine 的成绩是你的 SAT 的 super score。就说是可以当做你的提交的 SAT 成绩，例如第1次考试你的 reading 是750，数学是700，第2次你的 reading 是700，数学是750，那么你提交的 SAT 成绩，你的 super score 呢就是750加750是1500。
Okay. So I think Jocelyn already mentioned that the essay part has been eliminated. It's not optional, right?
Correct, as of June.
Okay. And then the next set of questions are related to the, tutoring you provide. The first question is, on average, what is the improvement of SAT for the students who have been worked with you, and did you teach online, and is the practice test also happen online?
Okay, I'll start with that because Jennifer and I we should both speak to that. We both have different experiences. My experience is improvement is directly correlated with 2 things: the time in the prep class and simply the dedication that the student shows and brings to his or her homework. Some improvement can be, 40, 50 points or more, or 100 points. It really varies. I would say for the student who takes a very casual approach to SAT prep, who doesn't necessarily do the homework, and also who makes one of the most common mistakes, and Jennifer and I have talked about this, one of the most common mistakes is to learn something and then to forget it. So for those students who learn something and then do not really make an effort to keep it in thought, mistakes are made again. But I would say that for a 10-session prep course, as opposed to, a cramming prep course, which some students, they like to sign up for test prep, 3 days before the exam. But a good solid workout, you could see substantial improvement in the score. I don't really want to give numbers because what happens is people have, either false hopes or they underestimate how much they can improve. But I can just tell you that I've seen great improvement when students take their test prep very seriously. They do the assignments, they show up for every lesson, and they listen, and they don't repeat mistakes. And, as Jennifer and I were both saying, we do provide a lot of emotional support and caring and nurturing, and we don't scold, and we're not judgmental. At the same time, a student does have to carry, the burden of learning and listening in class. To your second question, practice tests, Jennifer and I will be administering the practice tests online on Zoom.
How about the tutoring session?
Oh, tutoring sessions are all online, yes.
Another question, I'm not sure whether it's related to the tutoring, but it was asking how many months in advance should a student start studying for the SAT and at what intensity, which can also be an individual-based answer, right?
Yeah, so 我觉得这个问题就说，有几个因素吧。第一就是说这个孩子他的这个基础怎么样？那可能这个基础比较扎实的孩子，然后态度又比较认真的孩子，认真做练习的孩子，可能那当然时间就可以短一点。 那么基础如果一开始比较弱的话，这个就是 as with everything else， 这个积累都是一个 accumulation， 都需要时间的，那可能就要花的时间长一点。So it all depends on 你的 starting level， 你的 goal， 还有你这个就说你的是不是很认真的，就说做practice 做这些练习。另外呢，我们觉得就像我和 Jocelyn 我们谈到过很多，就说这些 common mistakes that students tend to make， 其中一个就是这个小猴子搬包谷的心理，就是说搬一个扔掉一个，搬一个扔掉一个，犯过的错误一犯再犯。所以这个呢，我们也会不断的提醒孩子们，你们就说以前的错误你要经常的 review， 然后这样的话呢，下次你就不会重复的犯以前犯过的错误。
Just to add to that, and Jennifer may have mentioned this, often, if you prepare too much in advance, it can sometimes backfire and not be to a student's advantage. I would say 8 to 10 sessions, is a good amount, especially if the student is serious. If you have a student who is not really, as I said, doing the homework, then more sessions certainly are required. And there is a lot of homework, to be done. But 10 sessions is a very, very good starting point, if not ending point.
Another question is asking about whether it's good to show the progress of improvement in SAT, or whether it's better to just prepare and make sure that you can get a high score the first time when you take it. Does it matter?
That sounds a little bit like, should I just take the first test for practice? I would say prepare as much as you can. In fact, do the test prep before the first test. Do it before the first test. Then you take the test and, you've done your best you could. And if you have to take it again, you take it again. But consider, just taking a test for practice the first time with no preparation, you don't do very well, you end up discouraged, and then then you do test prep, and then you take the test again and you do much better, but you still feel like you can do a little bit better. Now you're on your third test. With regard to the comment that, maybe you show improvement, what the schools do, and I think Jennifer may have mentioned this, they will take, for schools like Cornell University, Georgetown University, in the past, when all scores were required, they would take the best score from each test. So if you took the SAT 3 times and your math score was really strong the third time, the strongest, and your English score, your reading and writing score was strongest the second time, those are the 2 scores they look at. But today, because the SAT is optional, you really only need to submit you should only submit your best scores, unless you feel that, 1/2 of the score was very strong in one sitting and another half in another sitting. But I'm all for sharing less than you need to, because it's very difficult if you have to submit a poor score not to have them sort of glimpse it. That's my own feeling. Put your best foot forward, as they say.
Okay. So do you recommend anything in terms of how long it is ideal to kind of arrange between if you plan to take multiple tests?
Well, one of the advantages of starting in, is this the one? Yeah. One of the advantages, if you're, for example, in your junior year, of taking the test in November or December, or both. You take it in November, you're not really really pleased with the score. You take it again in December, and you still think you could do a little bit better. You can take it again in March, or you could even take it in August of the summer. But this is a good time to take it multiple times. You really, you want to, you got to be very careful about your time, because anyone who's had a student in the junior year knows it is very, very difficult junior year spring.
Okay, there are also questions about whether they can only take either English or math. Do they have to take it together? And
Yes.
I guess, yeah, whether you can tell them a little bit about what is your typical class look like, because some people are still kind of consider whether it's better for them to do self-study. How does it make a difference?
Well, our classes, as you saw on the screen, are an hour and a half, twice a week. But I just want to preface that by saying that Jennifer and I are willing to customize our class according to the wishes of students. But our sort of general approach is 2 1.5-hour sessions. What I do in my reading and writing classes is the first 5 minutes is very much devoted to teaching and going over strategy and getting a sense of, how students can improve their performance from the last time. And then the remaining 45 minutes, and sometimes it's a little less, is devoted to actually test taking. And I time students because you really do need to practice under a time constraint. I said before that it is also good to practice without the time constraint. And we do a little bit of that in the beginning, where I just say, let's just take the test without considering, the 8+ minutes per question rule. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to finish each passage in 13 minutes. Just try to understand that. But then we eventually start timing. And so I feel that practice and that discipline of coming to class, doing the homework, we do assign, both Jennifer and I assign homework. It's a discipline. It forces you to confront, this very serious topic. And I think that can be very helpful. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
So for the 90-minute session, are you working on both math and reading and writing, or is that?
Okay, so no, we teach separately. Okay. Jennifer teaches the 1 hour and a half class a week, and I teach 1 reading and writing class a week. Jennifer, were you going to say something just a minute ago?
Yeah, so our proposed schedule is that the student take 2 classes each week. 我们有90分钟的 reading writing， 90分钟的数学。刚才 to answer 刚才那个家长的问题，我的孩子是否能只 take reading and writing 或者只 take 数学？ The answer is 可以的。
And how many students do you have in one group? I think that's the last question.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And Jennifer and I really don't want the class to get too big, and we have capped our classes at 15, which, we'd like to keep it at 10, but we understand that we want to accommodate everybody. So we have capped our classes at 15.
Yeah, we have passed the scheduled time, and I say that there might still be some kind of questions coming in. I encourage you to, join the WeChat group from Coffee Club, or you can reach out for Jocelyn and Jennifer directly. I really learned a lot, and I feel like the students can benefit so much from working with you and taking your advice. So do you have any kind of wrap-up message for the audience? Jennifer and Jocelyn.
Well, 就是再次感谢大家在周六的晚上花这么多时间来参加我们的这个 discussion。大家如果我们还没有回答的问题，或者大家有什么其他的问题，我们可以 WeChat 我们，或者发 email 给我们。
Okay, I need to find. I could type in the email address into the chat box. Let me do it quickly. Everyone.
And I was just going to say that approach is everything in schoolwork and in standardized testing. One of the reasons that I named my company Cornerstone Prep is a cornerstone is the first stone that is laid on the foundation of a building. And to me, it's a metaphor for proper preparation, starting right, and not proceeding in a sloppy way or in a way that is not based on as I said, a strong foundation. So whatever you choose to do, be thorough and do not skimp. Do not, try to cut corners, as they say, but give it your best effort. And most people who have achieved success on the SAT have, it's not just a matter of intelligence, it's a matter of working hard.
Thank you, Jennifer and Jocelyn. 那么大家，我已经把他们的这个 email 通过这个 chat box 放在里面了，就是 info@saystoneprep.com。大家也可以通过这个方式联系他们，或者呢，你可以把现在大屏幕上的这个关于华人咖啡俱乐部或者思慧学院小助手的这个二维码，你扫了添加之后，他们也可以把你这个相关的一些问题，或者是你需要其他的信息，都可以通过这个方式来获取。那么感谢大家的参与，我们今天的讲座呢就到这里，谢谢。
Actually, Ina, you can use testing at cstoneprep.com. You said info. Testing, yeah. We got another, it was a better email address. Testing at cstoneprep.com.
So Saystone is Saystone,
yeah.
right? Okay.
CSTONE prep.com, but the first word is TESTING, testing.
Yes. Let me see if I got it right. Testing. Okay.
That's it. Oh, no, that's not spelled right. SCS.
Yeah. CSTONE.
Yes. You might want to,
Sure. I think I got it right this time.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm sorry we didn't supply that for you.
No problem.
依然最后一个 quick question， 刚才我看到有个家长问说，我们能不能 set up 一个 WeChat group 或这个 SAT 的 prep？
我看这个
可以，我们马上拉群就可以，然后把再跟大家 share 一下。
那是要加哪一个码呢？是加咖啡俱乐部这个还是思慧学院这个呢？
这两个都可以。
都可以。
然后我们建完群以后，感兴趣的直接就给他带到群里就可以了。
哦，好的，大家听到了吗？就是如果你们感兴趣要进群组的话，可以现在这个咖啡俱乐部或者是思慧学院任何一个，你扫码了之后呢，都会被拉到那个对应的群里面，然后可以跟 Jennifer 还有 Jocelyn 后续继续去沟通。或者大家要在那个微信上搜寻华人咖啡俱乐部，也可以找到我们。 好，那我们今天就到这里，感谢大家的关注和参与，欢迎你们关注我们下周以及未来华人咖啡俱乐部各种这个公益讲座以及思慧学院的培训，谢谢大家，各位晚安。
各位，谢谢一楠。
Thank you, Jocelyn and Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Ina. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Glad-
you.
glad-
Have a good night. Bye bye.
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 Goodbye.